Reggie Gilliam signed an extension, and there is plenty to talk about regarding the wide receivers, offensive line, and cornerback positions. Plus, some herd mentality questions are all coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Monday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder, we are free and available to you on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. We got a lot to get to here on a Monday. I want to talk about the Bills agreeing to a contract extension with Reggie Gilliam. We have a bunch of injury updates. I have some comments from the scrimmage that happened on Friday night. The Bills practiced on Sunday morning, so we have some practice recaps to get to and some really fun herd mentality questions, including one request for me to redraft the top 10 picks of the 2018 NFL Draft. Of course, the draft where the Bills secured Josh Allen. So a lot to get to here today. I do want to start with this, and I want to set the expectations for this week on the podcast because it's going to be a little bit different. I am going to be in Buffalo this week. I'm driving in on Monday morning, and I'll be in Buffalo through Saturday. And so I'm going to be at training camp practices this week on Wednesday and Thursday, which I cannot wait to be part of. I can't wait to get my own eyes on everything that we've been talking about for the last couple weeks here on the podcast and give you my own firsthand takeaways from what I'm observing at Bills training camp. And then I will be at the Colts preseason game, the Bills-Colts preseason game on Saturday. And so there's just going to be a lot of boots on the ground coverage this week. And that does require me to do some traveling. And so this week on the podcast is going to be a little bit different. And so I want to tell you exactly what you can expect. So this podcast today is your Monday podcast. I will not have a podcast for you on Tuesday because Monday I'm driving. It's going to be a long day of travel. Wednesday and Thursday, you'll get podcasts in the afternoon after practice, right? So I'll be at practice and then I will go and record. So those podcasts will drop on Wednesday and Thursday afternoon. Then on Friday, I'm going to give you a podcast that's going to break down what I'm looking for Saturday in preseason game 1 against the Colts. And then on Saturday, you'll get a podcast from me, way late, right? The game's at 7. I probably won't get back home until close to midnight and record in the wee hours in the morning. And then some point late Saturday into early Sunday morning, I'll give you a post-game reaction podcast. So a little bit different structure this week, but hopefully you understand why. And my ability to be in Buffalo should give us some really, really good stuff to get into from firsthand takeaways from observing two days of team practice, getting to spend some time around the team and coaches and players on Wednesday and Thursday as well. And then, of course, the game on Saturday. So just want to be clear about what to expect this week on the podcast. All right, so let's get into our discussion points, and let's start with the Bills agreeing to a 2-year contract extension with fullback / tight end / special teams extraordinaire Reggie Gilliam. He's been in the league for a couple years, an undrafted free agent out of Toledo. Signed a 2-year extension worth up to $5.2 million. Now, we'll see what the actual contract structure looks like. I'm sure the worth up to $5.2 million across 2 seasons was kind of dressed up, right? Dressed up by the agent to make sure that it looks like he took care of his client. But I'm sure the structure of the deal is a little bit different, and there's a lot of incentives kind of baked into it. But this is a good move for the Buffalo Bills. Reggie Gilliam, as we stated already, an undrafted free agent has earned a role on this team. Made the team a couple years in a row, carved out a little niche on offense, and then, of course, his value as a four-phase special teamer. What do I mean by a four-phase special teamer? That means you're an asset on kick return, punt return, kickoff, and punt. You can do all four major phases. That's a big deal. He provides a lot of value, right? On special teams alone, he's good at that. But there's also versatility on offense, whether that's at fullback or running back, tight end, kind of as this move piece, can do a lot of different roles. And if the Bills want to do more two-back stuff, some 22 personnel, some 21, some 23 personnel, you're going to really rely on having a guy that can truly play fullback. And that's what the Bills have in Reggie Gilliam. The other thing that I do want to mention here, obviously there's stuff to get into about the value that he brings to the team from a special teams perspective and what he enables the Bills to do schematically on offense because he can fill so many different roles, particularly that fullback role. But this is just once again another reminder that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they are willing to pay for special teams. Some teams don't believe that. Some teams believe that you set your roster and you think of the special teams component afterwards. Kind of fill in the blanks. Not the Bills. Not the Bills. They will go out and pay a Tyler Matakevich and a Tywan Jones and a Saran Neal and an Andre Smith and a Jake Kumaro and now a Reggie Gilliam. Loud and clear, right? The Bills are willing to pay for special teams. Like I said, some teams don't. The Buffalo Bills value that component of the game, and not just a kicker and a punter and a long snapper, but guys that cover kicks and punts and guys that can block on the return units. The proof's in the pudding. Reggie Gilliam, obviously a core member of that special teams unit, in addition to what he provides offensively. So a good story to tell here. You pay in a UDFA, a guy that's earned it, that's embraced his role, and now has a nice 2-year contract extension as an undrafted fullback special teamer out of Toledo. So good for him. Want to mention a couple of injury notes here. A lot of good news as it relates to the injury front. Roger Saffold, that's the big news. On Sunday, he was activated from the NFI list. And that's great because he's kind of been nursing the rib injury that he sustained from the car accident before camp. And he hasn't practiced to this point. But on Sunday, he was back. Now, he practiced in a limited capacity, but the fact that he was back on the field in pads around the team is great news as the Bills, enter this week now where there's a preseason game and the regular season's about a month away. You feel good about getting a guy like Roger Saffold back in the fray, especially given what this offensive line's been through. There's been some attrition already as it relates to injuries. Roger Saffold back in the mix is going to allow this unit to stabilize a little bit. On Sunday, he did individual drills, according to Ryan Talbot. More good news for the Bills' offensive line. Ryan Bates is back. He participated in the scrimmage on Friday night. He practiced in full on Sunday. And so it looks like the Bills' starting right guard is back and ready to go. And so there's two pieces that have come back to the lineup that are guys that we perceive to be starters to help stabilize this unit. Also, Spencer Brown, the Bills' incumbent starting right tackle, he's ramping up more and more. Of course, he's doing one-on-one drills, which we've already talked about, but he did teamwork on Sunday, according to Ryan Talbot. So back in there, full 11-on-11 drills, your right tackle was Spencer Brown. And that's really the first we've seen that happen to this point in camp. So 3 starters back in the mix here on this offensive line, and man, did we need to hear this stuff. Been talking a lot about the Bills being able to get their preferred 5 together and get them gelling and ramping up, and we're starting to see that happen here as we begin this week. A couple other notes here. Mitch Morse, he was given a veteran rest day on Sunday. Sounds like he needed it based on the comments that Josh Allen made on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, or Thursday, about how, he was kind of sticking in there because the Bills had so many offensive linemen out, and he needed a vet rest day, and he got one on Sunday, which meant Ryan Bates played center. Thought that was kind of interesting. A signal there that if if Morse goes down, then they're most comfortable sliding Bates to center and potentially, looking at a variety of guys at guard, whether it's Quessenberry, Greg Manns, Cody Ford, Tommy Doyle. Seems to be that's the move they're looking to make if Mitch Morse were to miss any time. Also out on Sunday with general soreness, Taron Johnson, Isaiah McKenzie, and Khalil Shakir. And so we have some things to talk about with McKenzie and Shakir out on Sunday, because that means Jamison Crowder was back in the lineup. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, if you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when an unexpected expense comes up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hang-ups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the scrimmage, the red and blue scrimmage Friday night at Highmark Stadium. The Bills gave out 70,000 tickets. They were free. About 35,000 showed up. Pretty good attendance for a practice. But if the Bills gave out 70,000 tickets, where was the other 35,000 of you? What's up with that? Why are you claiming a ticket and not showing up? Thought that's interesting. Feels like the big storyline coming out of that scrimmage was Josh Allen walking out in that red helmet, huh? You guys see that? As the NFL's shared, a lot of different teams have adopted an alternate helmet this year. The Bills weren't one of them, and a lot of fans want to see that red helmet. Well, Josh Allen comes out for this scrimmage in a red helmet, and it's not the normal red helmet that you'd expect. It's got this really strange two-stripe situation, these two blue stripes down the middle. Not sure what's going on there, why it was like that. But I thought that kind of ruined the helmet. Like, just give the normal striping that you would have expected to see on the red helmet, and that would have been awesome. Now, it's not an indicator that the Bills are going to release this uniform. There are still rules that prevent this from happening with the Bills. And so they'd either have to change their throwback uniforms, or the NFL would need to change their rules, because they, at this point, it's just not structured in a way that allows the Bills to have this look. But Josh Allen certainly knows how to appeal to the fans, and walked out of the tunnel with that red helmet on, and there was quite the stir as a result of it. Sounds like it was a really good scrimmage for wide receiver Gabriel Davis. Matt Marino, he called him unguardable. Also, Khalil Shakir made some plays. I'm sure you saw a lot of the video that's come out. Some of those highlights, Khalil Shakir winning down the field and having a really strong scrimmage. And so as we continue to hear about Gabriel Davis and Khalil Shakir making a lot of plays, we're getting more of an understanding that they deserve a lot of credit, but the Bills are picking on Kyer Elam. They're picking on Dane Jackson in practice, and they should. Good. I want to hear that. I want those guys to be tested. They're probably going to have to fill a major role for this team. But it sounds like they're giving up a lot of plays, right? And so there's probably a lot of good back and forth, competitive toughness, teachable moments, all that type of stuff. But as we're about a month away from the Bills taking on the Rams, week 1 of the regular season, is it fair for us to start being concerned about what the Bills actually have at corner if Tre'Davious White's not ready for week 1? Thought this was pretty telling. If you read Joe Biscaglia's recap article on the scrimmage, he said this about what happened on Friday night. Quote, Allen, Diggs, and Davis picked on Kaiir Elam a bit Friday night. They hit him on some underneath throws and then burned him for both Davis touchdowns. And it could have been worse. On one play, Diggs beat Elam clean to the end zone, getting the rookie to stumble in coverage, but Allen underthrew the pass, allowing Elam to get in the way. If the ball was there, it would have been another touchdown. On another end zone attempt to Diggs, safety Damar Hamlin bailed Elam out by faking out Allen and nearly picking off the pass, but Diggs beat Elam cleanly off the line. Elam and Jackson's struggles have allowed rookie 6th-round pick Christian Benford to enter the starting conversation. For the 4th straight practice, Benford got some work against the Bills' top receivers in team drills. So as we've sat here and talked about Christian Benford getting this opportunity, it feels like it's as much about the Bills needing to consider some other options as it is Christian Benford actually earning that opportunity. Sounds like there's some real concerns here about Elam and Jackson and their ability to lock down this corner situation as a tandem, right? Without Trey White, that's your starting corners. With Trey White, one of those guys is one of your starting corners. I think the Bills have to ask themselves some hard questions about what they have in these young players and how much of a stumbling block it's going to be if they have to really heavily rely on them to start the season. Now, there's options out there for the Bills to consider, veterans, whether that's Joe Hayden, Chris Harris, Xavier Rhodes, A.J. Bouye. Heck, Josh Norman's out there. I wouldn't be a big fan of that, but there's options. That's the point I want to make here, especially Joe Hayden, who I think has still played reasonably well this last few years in Pittsburgh. Even Xavier Rhodes played reasonably well at times recently for the Colts. A.J. Bouye, some reasonably good contributions. And you're talking about veteran-savvy guys. You're just asking them to play zone defense, right? It's not like you're going to be a man-heavy team and ask these guys to mirror and match and stay in phase and carry routes vertically down the field. There's going to be help. But the Bills probably need to start asking themselves some hard questions about what they actually have at cornerback and if it's sufficient enough for them to not be completely hindered at this point in time. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not optimistic long-term about Kaiir Elam. That doesn't mean I don't think Dane Jackson's a good depth player. But this team's about to take on the Los Angeles Rams in week 1. Got the Dolphins in week 3. The Chiefs. You got some tough, potentially really good receivers and passing offenses early on the schedule. What do you have at corner? And if you're not happy with it, when do you pull the trigger on a Joe Hayden or an Xavier Rhodes or an A.J. Bouye or whoever? Maybe the fact that the Bills haven't pulled the trigger on one of those players is a good sign about Trey White potentially being ready. My mind can certainly go in a lot of different directions, but I'm willing to admit to you right now that I have some level of concern about what this is going to look like if Trey White's not ready. And I don't know how much further you want to go before you do bring in a Joe Hayden or, one of these players I've mentioned. Another big takeaway from the scrimmage, Joe Buscaglia talked about the run game not being very effective. Apparently, Devin Singletary had a 24-yard run early in the scrimmage, but after that, the Bills' rushing offense had 19 rushes for 47 yards. James Cook, 2.8 yards per carry. Zach Moss, 1.7. It's worth noting that a lot of that work came in short yardage in the red zone, which is an indicator of what we've kind of talked about, that's the role that Zach Moss can help this football team doing, is being that actual short yardage back. And then Duke Johnson, 1.8 yards per carry. Now, I haven't seen the tape. I can't really speak to it, but it sounds like generally speaking, the Bills' rushing offense didn't look very effective. Now, there's two ways that you can look at this. One, well, good for the defense, right? The defense obviously did well to stop the Bills' rushing offense, but also I think it speaks to the state of the offensive line, where you go back to that scrimmage and it's really Ryan Bates' first action in a while. You don't really have you don't have Roger Saffold, you don't have Spencer Brown, really. This offensive line isn't what the team wants it to be right now. So it's probably a little bit of both. Good defense, the offensive line not, kind of being a patchwork unit at this point in time, but for the excitement that exists with some of the passing offense and what we heard about A.J. Epinesa and Greg Rousseau and even Boogie Basham, feels like this Bills rushing attack isn't there yet. And that's okay. You still got some preseason games. You got a month to go here, but in its first opportunity, in front of a crowd and playing real ball, didn't sound like the Bills ran the ball like you'd think they'd want to. The other thing I want to get into here is Jamison Crowder. He's back. Practice on Sunday. Big opportunity for him with Isaiah McKenzie and Khalil Shakir not practicing on Sunday. And so it's been a lot of hype regarding those two, especially McKenzie. We've talked a lot about the full-time role for him. And he's really been unchallenged because Jamison Crowder's been injured. Well, he's back in the fray. This is what Ryan Talbot had to say in his recap article about Jamison Crowder. He said, quote, Josh Allen and Jamison Crowder worked on their chemistry at Sunday's practice. Allen targeted Crowder a few times during 11-on-11s, and the receiver hauled in every pass thrown his way. After Crowder and Allen exited the field on one series, Crowder went to Allen to discuss the routes further. Crowder has missed a lot of time at camp due to soreness, and it's clear that he's trying to make up for that lost time with Josh Allen. And so McKenzie certainly made a strong claim for himself, but this is Crowder's opportunity now to showcase himself. And so we'll see how this all plays out. My concern with Crowder is this. If Crowder's not your starting slot receiver, what is he? Because if he's your wide receiver 5, that guy has to play special teams. Jamison Crowder's not going to cover kicks and punts or block for kick return and punt return. So to me, Jamison Crowder's either your featured starting slot receiver or I don't know. I have a hard time identifying that path to the roster for him. Now he's got that opportunity now. We'll see what happens. There's still a lot of time between now and when these decisions have to be made, but I'm curious to see how this plays out. And now that he's gotten his opportunity, and obviously Crowder, a guy that's had a lot of production in the league, came to the Bills, like I've said a million times, comes to Buffalo, younger than Cole Beasley was when he came to the Bills, and a far more accomplished player in terms of production. So generally speaking, the 3 big takeaways that I wanted you to have from this segment was the offensive line is starting to come together here as guys return from injuries, which is great. The wide receiver situation is really interesting now that Crowder is back. I want to see how he can force the issue. And then cornerback, how comfortable are the Bills with what they have? There's options. I'm interested to see how that all plays out. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's close this thing out with a handful of herd mentality questions. Got some good stuff to get to. Let's get started. First one comes from James. James says, I was hoping you could talk a bit about Chad Hall. I love seeing him flying down the sideline to help one of the receivers up after a big play. And I remember the receivers buying him a truck a few years ago, so he must be popular with the players. What do we know about him? Is he someone who wants to be a coordinator, a head coach someday? Is he going to be a lifetime position coach? I love his contributions to the Bills and hope he stays in the fold as long as possible. Yeah, I really respect Chad Hall a ton. He's the Bills wide receivers coach, 36 years old. Came to the staff in 2017 with Sean McDermott as an offensive assistant. In 2017 and 2018, got the opportunity to be the wide receivers coach in 2019 and has held that job now for 3 seasons. He's entering his 4th season as the Bills wide receivers coach, and I think that's significant because I had some level of concern that Brian Daboll would pluck him and want to bring him to the Giants. And, I don't think that he would have left the Bills to be the wide receivers coach, right? The same move to go to the Giants, and certainly the Bills would block that. But I thought either the Bills or the Giants might be able to entice Chad Hall by giving him the label of passing game coordinator. Well, that didn't happen. And so that to me is a good sign about his long-term prospects in Buffalo. But certainly this guy is going to gain some popularity as Diggs comes in and plays the best football of his career. Gabriel Davis and the track that he's on, Isaiah McKenzie's trajectory. There's been a lot of good things. Cole Beasley, John Brown having their most productive seasons ever with Chad Hall. A lot of good things happening here. You feel good about this trajectory. You love his energy. You love, like you mentioned, the players buying him that truck, and it just feels like there's nothing but good things to say about Chad Hall, and his unit performs really well. So he feels like one of those guys that, eventually is going to be a passing game coordinator, then an offensive coordinator, and depending on how all that goes, maybe have head coaching opportunities. But it feels like the Bills have a really bright young coach in Chad Hall who's on a nice trajectory, and I feel similarly as you do in that I hope he stays around for as long as possible. But a talented guy like this is going to want to keep climbing that ladder, and I think that's probably going to happen very soon for Chad Hall. I'm a little surprised that with Daboll going to the Giants that he didn't make him the passing game coordinator and try to pluck him for the Bills. Patrick says, my biggest concern now is that the Bills will start out flat again like they did in 2021 in the opener against the Steelers. You were involved in last year's training camp. Can you recall anything from that period which would have caused the offense, special teams, and coaches to fall so flat in such a game? As I think about my big takeaways from that Steelers loss, I remember the Bills couldn't block, Casey or Cameron Hayward, Melvin Ingram, and TJ Watt. Those guys caused a lot of problems, and the Bills just couldn't get any explosive plays going. Obviously, the punt block, Matt Hawk took 7 years to get that punt off, and they blocked it and got a touchdown. The Bills were humbled that day. They were definitely flat. I think that was pretty fair to say. And I think it was kind of a little glimpse of what we saw the Bills for about 10 weeks or so, where there were some moments where the Bills looked like the Bills you expected to see, whether that was the Washington game, the Houston game, Kansas City. But there was a lot of games where you felt like the Bills were flat. And I said a bunch of times last year that I thought the Bills were an entitled football team that thought they would show up and the game would go a certain way. And when it didn't, they didn't respond well. I think that Steelers game in week 1 was a little glimpse of some of those blips in the radar that came up, whether it was the Jacksonville game or the Indy game or obviously Pittsburgh. It was disappointing, but I think it was just a little snippet of some of those early season issues that the Bills fell into up until about that Tampa game. Justin says, with the Bills now being in win now mode and seemingly prioritizing running backs with pass catching upside in Ken Dorsey's new system, is it worth trading a day 3 pick for Kareem Hunt and acquiring a proven commodity at running back, or is the lack of positional value enough for Bean to justify not trading a late pick on a team with very few holes and will likely have trouble attracting undrafted free agents just due to the ability for them to make the 53? I think there's some interesting stuff to get into with Kareem Hunt. First of all, I mean, if you trade for Kareem Hunt, he's telling you right now that he's not happy with his contract. And he's getting paid $6.25 million this year, and he wants a new deal. Well, I'm here to tell you that $6 million is about what I want to pay for my entire running back room, much less one player. He's leveraging the situation in Cleveland. Yeah, Deshaun Watson probably going to be suspended here for a while. They're going to have to lean on that rushing attack. Long season, Nick Chubb's their dude, but Kareem Hunt can take something off of Nick Chubb and allow that pair to be healthy all season. Oh, by the way, the Browns have the most cap space in the NFL. $49 million right now under the cap, the Cleveland Browns. $49 million. That's like double the next closest team, the most cap space. To me, this is a great leverage play by Kareem Hunt to understand the circumstances all of the way around and put himself in position to kind of force the issue here and leverage the opportunity for a new deal. So I think that's kind of the overall status of the situation. And I would not want the Bills to trade for Kareem Hunt and pay him the contract that I think he's going to demand. I don't think that's a great allocation of resources. I'm not an advocate for paying running backs. So trading for one and then paying him a multi-year extension that's probably going to be in the $7-8 million a year range, that's not how I would do business. Last one is from 505 Roots, who says, I have a herd mentality question. Could you do your 2018 NFL draft redraft? And he shared a PFF graphic of a redraft that they did, and they had Baker Mayfield going number 3. So 505 Roots wants my redraft of the top 10 picks of the 2018 NFL draft. And I'll tell you what, a lot of good players that I couldn't find a spot for. This was a really, really, really good draft class. So this is how I would redo it. Of course, I don't have the Bills. The Bills don't have the 7th pick because I don't think they would have traded into that without Josh Allen being there. And then, of course, the Raiders still have the 10th pick because I don't think the Cardinals would trade up for Josh Rosen. So I had the Browns at number 1 picking Josh Allen, the Giants at number 2 picking Lamar Jackson, the Jets at number 3 picking Quentin Nelson, at number 4 the Browns picking Jair Alexander, the cornerback for the Packers. Number 5 the Denver Broncos selecting Darius Leonard. Number 6 the Indianapolis Colts selecting Fred Warner. Number 7 the Bucks actually picking Vita Vea, who they got at 12. The Bears picking wide receiver DJ Moore. 49ers at number 9, safety Minkah Fitzpatrick, and at number 10, the Raiders, Denzel Ward. A lot of good players that I couldn't fit into that top 10, but that felt reasonably good to me after I put it down, and I went with it for the sake of this podcast. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I will next talk to you on a Wednesday afternoon after I spend my day in Rochester watching the Bills practice. I'll give you my firsthand takeaways Wednesday afternoon, again on Thursday afternoon. I'll be at the Colts game on Saturday. Hopefully I'll be able to meet some of you guys at the game or at practice, or maybe I'll find myself somewhere where I can send out a tweet that says, hey, I'm going to be here from these hours. I'm not sure. I have a pretty full schedule, a lot of content responsibilities. Actually, the Draft Network is sending 2 other people with me, and so we got a lot planned. So I would definitely check out our social handles. Myself on Instagram, I think it's at @the_Joe Marino, Twitter at the Joe Marino, and then the Draft Network on Twitter and Instagram. There's going to be a lot coming your way this week. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're following those handles. Make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast. Rate, review, share it. Tell a friend about what's going on. Looking forward to this week. Hope you'll come along for the ride. Have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to catching up with you again on a Wednesday afternoon.